A dog struggling helplessly in an icy river after saving a weaker kitten. A tiny kitten blocking the path of a stranger in the freezing cold. A man who risks his life, diving into the dark water to save a life that isn't his, and a story behind it all that made the world search for him. Before we begin, please like and follow to support us. Thank you. The morning arrived wrapped in a thin gray mist, the kind that softened edges and made the world feel unfinished, as if something important had not yet been decided. Ryan Carter stood beside his aging pickup truck at the edge of a narrow roadside, one hand resting against the cold metal of the door. At 35, he carried the kind of presence that did not need to speak loudly. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a powerful chest shaped by years of discipline. His dark brown hair was cut short in a military style, and a light stubble traced the sharp line of his jaw. His eyes, steady and watchful, held the quiet tension of someone who had learned to expect trouble long before it arrived. Once, he had been a Navy SEAL, trained to move through chaos with precision. Now, he moved through silence, taking whatever work he could find, fixing fences, hauling supplies, driving when someone needed an extra hand. The world no longer asked much of him, and he had stopped asking much in return. But there was one thing he never turned away from. Animals. Not because it was easy, but because it wasn't. Inside his modest wooden home, a handful of rescued dogs and cats waited each day for him to return, their lives stitched together by small acts of care. They had been abandoned, injured, forgotten. In them, Ryan recognized something familiar, a quiet resilience that did not beg for attention, only for a chance to continue. That morning, he had just finished a delivery job and was heading back along the river road when something caught his eye. Movement. A flicker of urgency where there should have been none. Down by the riverbank, half hidden beneath the mist, a small kitten stumbled onto the road. It was barely more than a few months old, its thin body soaked, fur clinging in uneven patches, as if the cold had tried to claim it, and failed. Its color was a soft gray mixed with faint stripes, the kind that would have gone unnoticed in better circumstances. But its eyes, wide, bright, and filled with something deeper than fear, locked onto Ryan's truck. He slowed. The kitten did not move aside. Instead, it stepped forward, right into the path of the truck. Ryan pressed the brake firmly, the tires crunching against gravel as the vehicle came to a halt. He leaned forward slightly, studying the small creature through the windshield. "Hey," he murmured under his breath, not with annoyance, but with a quiet curiosity. The kitten did something unexpected. It approached, not cautiously, not hesitantly, directly. Ryan opened the door and stepped down, his boots landing heavily against the damp ground. The cold air wrapped around him, but he barely noticed. His attention was fixed on the kitten as it reached him. It lifted one paw and scratched lightly against his hand. Once, twice, again. Not enough to hurt, just enough to insist. Ryan frowned slightly, not in anger, but in thought. There was something in the rhythm of the kitten's movement, something deliberate, almost intentional. "Easy," he said softly, lowering his hand. The kitten did not stop. It turned its head toward the river, then back at him, then scratched again. Ryan exhaled slowly. In another life, in another place, he might have ignored it, dismissed it as instinct, as randomness, but instinct had kept him alive before. And this didn't feel random. He crouched slightly, bringing himself closer to the kitten's level. Its small body trembled, not just from cold, but from urgency that seemed too large for something so fragile. "You trying to show me something?" he asked quietly. The kitten turned and ran. Not far, just enough to make sure he would follow. Ryan stood there for a moment, the faintest hint of a smile touching his lips. It wasn't amusement. It was recognition, the kind that came when the world offered something unusual, and you chose to accept it. "All right," he muttered, closing the truck door behind him. "Lead the way." The kitten moved quickly now, its tiny paws slipping slightly on the damp earth as it headed toward the riverbank. Ryan followed, his longer strides closing the distance easily, but he kept his pace measured, allowing the small creature to stay ahead. As they approached the edge of the river, the sound changed. The quiet stillness broke. Water, moving faster than it should. Ryan's expression shifted instantly, the softness in his face replaced by focus. His shoulders tightened slightly, his posture adjusting as something deeper, older, began to surface within him. The kitten reached the edge, stopped, and looked down. Ryan stepped beside it, and saw. A large German shepherd struggled in the freezing current, its powerful body now reduced to desperate, uneven movements. Its black and tan fur was soaked, heavy, dragging it downward with each passing second. Its ears, once upright and alert, now flattened against its head, and its amber eyes, still sharp, still aware, searched not for escape, but for one final chance. The current pulled harder. The dog slipped lower, and for a brief moment, its head disappeared beneath the surface. Ryan did not speak. He did not hesitate. But something inside him tightened. Not fear, not doubt. Something heavier. Because he understood exactly what he was looking at. And exactly what it would cost. Ryan did not remember deciding to move. 1 second he stood at the edge of the river, the cold air pressing against his lungs, and the next, his body was already in motion, driven by something older than thought, something carved into him, long before this quiet town had ever known his name. The German shepherd vanished beneath the surface again. That was enough. Ryan tore off his jacket in a single motion, boots pounding forward. Then he jumped. The water hit like a shock of electricity, violent, suffocating, immediate. It stole the breath from his chest and wrapped around him with a cold so absolute it felt almost personal. For a split second, his body rebelled, muscles tightening, lungs refusing to cooperate. But training did not ask for comfort. It demanded obedience. He pushed forward. The current fought him, dragging sideways, pulling down, trying to turn him into something weightless and useless. But Ryan cut through it with practiced strokes, his movements efficient, deliberate, each one calculated not to waste energy he could not afford to lose. Ahead, the dog surfaced again. Barely. Its head broke through the water for just a moment, jaws opening as if to draw in air that no longer seemed enough. Its body was large, powerful by nature, the kind built for strength and endurance, but now it trembled under the strain of exhaustion. The thick black and tan coat that should have protected it had become a burden, dragging it deeper with every second. Ryan reached it, just as it began to slip again. His hand caught the scruff at the back of its neck, solid, heavy, alive. "Stay with me," he muttered, his voice low and steady despite the chaos around him. The dog did not struggle. That was what struck him most. No panic, no snapping, no blind resistance. Just surrender, not to death, but to him. Ryan shifted his grip, pulling the animal closer, wrapping one arm around its chest. The weight was immense now, soaked through, muscles slackening as strength faded. For a moment even Ryan felt it, the dangerous pull downward, the quiet suggestion that this might be more than he could carry. But there was no room for that thought. He turned and swam. Each stroke burned. The cold clawed deeper, numbing his fingers, stiffening his limbs. The current dragged at them both, as if unwilling to release what it had nearly claimed. More than once, his footing slipped when his boots scraped against unseen rocks beneath the surface. More than once, the dog's body sagged so heavily he feared it had already given up. But then, a small sound, a faint, broken breath from the dog against his arm. Still there. Ryan pushed harder. At the edge of the bank, the mud was slick, unstable. He tried to pull himself up, but the weight of the dog dragged him back, water swallowing them again for a brief, terrifying second. He gritted his teeth, planted his knee against the submerged ground, and used every remaining ounce of strength to haul the animal forward. They broke onto land together. Ryan collapsed onto his side, chest heaving, water pouring from his clothes as if the river refused to let him go, even now. For a few seconds he did nothing, just lay there, feeling the cold settle deep into his bones. Then he turned. The dog lay still. Too still. Ryan pushed himself up despite the protest of his body and rolled the animal gently onto its side. Up close, the dog was even more striking. Large-framed, likely 4 or 5 years old, with a broad chest and powerful shoulders that spoke of a life once full of strength. Its fur, though matted with water, held the rich contrast of black and deep brown, and its face carried a quiet intelligence that had not yet faded. "Hey, hey," Ryan said, pressing his hand against the dog's ribcage. Nothing. For a moment, something flickered across his face, something raw, something he rarely allowed himself to feel anymore. Not again. He leaned down, adjusting the dog's position, his hands working with calm urgency. He pressed gently, then again, forcing water from its lungs. His movements were steady, practiced, not from veterinary training, but from years of refusing to let life slip away when there was still something left to fight for. "Come on," he murmured. A pause. Then, a cough. Sharp, wet, real. Water spilled from the dog's mouth as its body jerked, drawing in a ragged breath that sounded almost like pain. Ryan exhaled, a quiet release of tension he hadn't acknowledged until that moment. "Yeah, that's it," he said softly. Beside them, the kitten let out a small, desperate cry. Ryan glanced over. The tiny gray creature stood just a few feet away, its entire body trembling, fur still clinging to its thin frame. But it had not run. It had not hidden. Its wide eyes remained fixed on the dog, as if refusing to leave until the outcome was certain. "Stubborn little thing, aren't you?" Ryan muttered, a faint trace of warmth entering his voice. He reached out, scooping the kitten gently into one hand, careful not to apply too much pressure. It was lighter than he expected, fragile in a way that made his grip instinctively softer. Then he turned back to the dog. "All right, big guy. Your turn." The German Shepherd blinked weakly, its amber eyes opening just enough to register the world again. There was confusion there, and exhaustion, but also something else. Awareness. Ryan slid his arms beneath the dog's body, lifting with controlled effort. The weight was still significant, but manageable now that the worst had passed. The dog did not resist. It simply allowed itself to be carried. Trust, again. Ryan stood, his soaked clothes clinging heavily to him, and made his way back toward the road. Each step left a dark imprint in the dirt behind him, a quiet trail marking where something had almost ended, and didn't. At the truck, he opened the passenger door and carefully laid the dog across the seat, adjusting its position to keep its airway clear. The kitten he placed beside it, close enough for warmth, but not so close as to cause stress. He reached into the back, pulling out an old blanket, worn, but clean. "Not much," he said under his breath, draping it over both of them. "But it'll do." The dog's breathing was shallow but steady now. The kitten curled instinctively into the fold of the blanket, its small body pressing close to the larger form beside it. Ryan closed the door gently. For a moment he stood there, one hand resting against the frame of the truck, looking through the window at the 2 lives he had just pulled back from the edge. No cameras, no witnesses, just a choice, and the quiet weight of what that choice meant. He walked around to the driver's side, climbed in, and started the engine. The truck rumbled to life, an old sound, familiar and steady. As he pulled away from the river, neither he nor the animals inside knew that somewhere above the bend, mounted high on a rusted metal pole near the bridge, a small security camera had captured everything. The town did not wake up all at once. It stirred slowly, like an old memory returning in fragments, carried through screens and quiet conversations that traveled farther than anyone expected. By the time Ryan Carter pulled his truck into the narrow dirt path leading to his home, the world had already begun to notice something he had not meant to show. But inside the truck, there was only silence. The German Shepherd lay stretched across the passenger seat, its breathing shallow but steadier now. Each rise and fall of its chest a quiet victory. Up close, its strength was undeniable. Broad shoulders, thick neck, the kind of build shaped not by comfort, but by survival. Yet beneath that strength, there was something softer now, something newly fragile. The kitten, no more than 3 months old, had curled tightly against the dog's side, its small body pressed into the warmth it had nearly lost forever. Ryan glanced at them once, then back at the road. "Almost there," he said quietly, though he wasn't sure which of them he was speaking to. His home sat just beyond a line of weathered fencing, a modest wooden structure that had seen better years, but refused to collapse. The paint had faded, the roof carried patches where repairs had been made more than once, and the porch sagged slightly under its own age. But there was something else there, something harder to define. It was not a house built for comfort. It was a place that had learned how to hold on. Ryan stepped out of the truck and opened the passenger door carefully. He lifted the German Shepherd first, arms steady despite the lingering cold still locked in his muscles. The dog did not resist, its head resting weakly against his shoulder, amber eyes half open, observing without fear. Trust had already taken root where doubt should have been. Inside, the air was warmer, not by much, but enough. The room was simple, almost bare where Ryan slept. A narrow bed pushed against the wall, a small table with a single chair, a worn lamp that cast a soft yellow light. There were no decorations, no signs of a life built for display. But in the far corner, it was different. Blankets, neatly arranged, bowls filled with water, a space that had been shaped not by design, but by care. Several animals lifted their heads as Ryan entered. A brown mutt with a missing patch of fur over its left shoulder watched quietly, its eyes gentle despite the scars that told a harder story. A white cat, older, with one ear slightly torn, stretched slowly, as if greeting a familiar rhythm. None of them barked. None of them rushed forward. They simply acknowledged. Ryan lowered the German Shepherd onto a thick folded blanket, adjusting its position carefully. The kitten he placed beside it again, where it immediately pressed closer, as if confirming that the bond forged in cold water had not broken. "You're safe here," Ryan murmured. He moved without hesitation after that, fetching dry towels, gently pressing them into the dog's fur, working patiently to draw out the cold. His hands were firm but careful, the kind that understood both strength and restraint. The dog flinched once, then settled again, accepting the process. "Easy," Ryan said softly. "You made it this far. Don't quit now." The hours passed quietly. At some point the dog lifted its head fully for the first time, eyes clearer, breathing deeper. It did not try to stand, but it watched Ryan with a focus that felt almost deliberate. "You don't have a name, do you?" Ryan said, sitting back on his heels. The dog blinked once. Ryan allowed himself a faint smile. "Yeah, we'll figure that out later." Outside, the world continued moving in ways he could not see. A man named Daniel Reeves sat inside a small monitoring office near the old bridge. In his early 50s, Daniel carried the look of someone who had spent most of his life watching things others ignored. He was lean, with short gray hair and a face lined not by age alone, but by years of quiet observation. His job was simple: review footage, report anomalies, maintain records. It was not a role that asked for attention, but that morning, something caught his eye. A figure, a man, jumping into freezing water without hesitation. Daniel leaned closer to the screen, his brow furrowing slightly as he replayed the footage. The image was grainy, distant but clear enough. The dog, the struggle, the rescue. Daniel sat back slowly, exhaling through his nose. "Well, I'll be," he muttered. He had seen accidents before, carelessness, mistakes, but this was different. There was no panic in the man's movements, no hesitation, just certainty. Daniel hesitated for a moment, fingers resting on the keyboard. He wasn't the kind of man who chased attention, but something about this felt like it should not be buried in a system no one checked. So he made a decision. Simple. Quiet. He uploaded the clip. No music. No commentary. Just truth. At first it moved slowly. A few views, a handful of shares. Then something shifted. People noticed. They paused. They watched again. And then they started looking closer. "Who is he?" The question spread quickly, carried through comments, reposts, messages sent between strangers who suddenly shared a common curiosity. More videos surfaced. A man, same build, same posture, cutting a wire trap from a stray dog's leg. Another clip, freeing a cat tangled in a length of rope behind an abandoned building. None of the videos were clear. None of them showed his face fully. But the pattern, it was unmistakable. A veterinarian in the nearby town, a woman named Dr. Emily Carter, recognized it first. In her early 40s, she had a calm, steady presence, her dark hair tied back neatly, her expression always composed, but never distant. Years of treating injured animals had shaped her into someone both practical and deeply compassionate. "I think I know him," she said in a short video response. "He brings animals in, pays what he can, sometimes nothing at all, but he never leaves them." That was all it took. The story spread faster. People began tracing the road, following landmarks, comparing footage, finding direction. Back in his quiet home, Ryan sat on the floor beside the German Shepherd, unaware of the world that had begun to circle closer. The dog shifted slightly, lifting its head again. The kitten stretched, letting out a small, satisfied sound. Ryan leaned back against the wall, closing his eyes for just a moment. Outside, the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the worn fence. And somewhere beyond that fence, people were already starting to look for him. Morning arrived with a pale, uncertain light, the kind that slipped quietly through the cracks of old wood and settled gently across a room that had never asked for attention. Ryan Carter woke before the sun fully rose. He always did. Years of training had carved that rhythm into him, long before his life had grown quiet and small. But this morning felt different, though he could not yet explain why. Perhaps it was the unfamiliar weight of two new lives breathing under his roof, or perhaps it was something else, something waiting just beyond the edges of his awareness. He sat up slowly, his body stiff from the cold that had settled into him the day before. For a moment, he simply listened. Soft breathing, a faint rustle, the low, steady sound of life continuing. He turned his head. The German Shepherd was awake. Now dry, its coat revealed its full strength again, thick, black and tan, with a natural sheen that spoke of resilience. Its large frame rested across the blankets, but its head was lifted, ears slightly forward, watching Ryan with a calm intensity that had not been there the day before. The weakness was still there, but it was no longer winning. The kitten, curled tightly against the dog's side, stirred as well. Its tiny body stretched, revealing how small it truly was. Perhaps 12 weeks old at most, with delicate limbs and a narrow frame that had known more hardship than comfort. Its fur, now dry, showed a soft gray pattern with faint stripes, and its eyes, though still wide, no longer carried the same desperate edge. "You both made it," Ryan said quietly, his voice low and steady. He pushed himself to his feet, moving toward the small kitchen area. The routine began without thought. Water bowls filled, food measured carefully, movements efficient but gentle. He worked with the same quiet precision he had once carried into far more dangerous places. But today, something interrupted that rhythm. A sound. Faint at first, then clearer. Voices. Ryan paused. He frowned slightly, setting down the bowl in his hand as his attention shifted toward the front of the house. The voices grew louder, layered with something unfamiliar. Excitement, curiosity, urgency. He moved toward the door. Slowly, not cautiously, but deliberately. When he opened it, he stopped. There were people. More than a few. Several stood near the edge of the yard, others closer to the porch, holding cameras, phones, equipment. Their expressions varied. Some curious, some eager, some almost reverent in a way that felt out of place. At the front stood a woman in her late 30s, tall and slender, with sharp features softened by a controlled, professional calm. Her blonde hair was pulled back neatly, and she wore a long beige coat that suggested both practicality and intent. Her name was Laura Mitchell, a local journalist known for chasing stories others overlooked, her reputation built not on noise, but on persistence. Years ago, she had left a larger city after a personal loss that had reshaped her priorities, choosing instead to tell quieter stories that still mattered. "Mr. Carter?" she asked, her voice steady but not intrusive. Ryan said nothing. His expression did not harden, but it closed slightly, like a door that had learned when not to open fully. "We just want to ask a few questions," Laura continued, gesturing lightly to the camera crew behind her. "About the video." Ryan's eyes shifted briefly across the group. Video. The word settled into place. He understood now. For a moment, he considered responding, explaining, but the instinct that had guided him for years moved first. "No," he said simply. Not harsh, not defensive, just final. Laura paused, studying him carefully. She was used to resistance, but this felt different. There was no anger here, no fear of exposure, only a quiet refusal that came from somewhere deeper. "You saved that dog," she said gently. "People—" "I didn't do it for people," Ryan interrupted. His voice remained calm, but there was weight behind it now. "I didn't do it to be seen." A silence followed. Not uncomfortable, but heavy. Laura nodded slowly, recognizing something she could not push against. "I understand," she said. And for a moment it seemed that might be the end of it. But the crowd did not leave. More people had begun to gather at the edges, drawn by the same curiosity that had spread across screens the night before. Phones were raised, voices whispered. Someone pointed toward the house. Ryan looked past them. At the road, at the space where he had once been invisible. That space was gone. He exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing, not because the situation had changed, but because he had made a decision. He stepped back. Then, without ceremony, he opened the door wider. "If you're here," he said quietly, "then you should see what you're talking about." The words were not an invitation. They were a condition. Laura exchanged a quick glance with her crew, then stepped forward carefully, her movements respectful, measured. One by one, others followed, their energy shifting from excitement to something quieter as they crossed the threshold. Inside, the difference was immediate. The room where Ryan slept remained simple, almost bare. A single bed, a small table, no decoration, no excess. But beyond that, warmth, blankets layered carefully, food bowls placed with intention, and animals, more than a few, a dozen at least. Dogs of different sizes, each carrying signs of past hardship, missing patches of fur, healed scars, cautious eyes that had learned not to trust too quickly. Cats, older and younger, some resting, others watching silently from their places. All alive. All safe. Laura's expression changed, not into surprise, but into understanding. "These are all yours?" she asked softly. Ryan shook his head. "They're not mine," he said. "They just don't have anywhere else." A small brown dog limped slightly as it approached him, leaning gently against his leg. Ryan reached down without thinking, resting his hand against its back, his touch instinctively gentle. "They eat before I do," he added, almost as an afterthought. The room fell quiet again, not because there was nothing to say, but because something had already been said, without words. Outside, the world waited. Inside, it had already found what it was looking for. The story did not explode all at once. It unfolded like a quiet fire, catching dry leaves, spreading from one heart to another, until it could no longer be contained. By midday, the footage had traveled far beyond the town. What began as a single video, grainy, distant, almost accidental, had become something larger. People did not just watch it, they felt it. And when people feel something deeply enough, they begin to act. Laura Mitchell stood just outside Ryan's home, her phone still in hand, eyes lingering on the images she had recorded inside. She had covered stories of loss, of quiet resilience, of people rebuilding after everything had been taken from them. But this was different. This was not a story about surviving tragedy. This was a story about choosing kindness when no one was looking. She uploaded the footage. No dramatic edits. No music. Just truth. Within hours, the response surged. Comments flooded in. Not the usual noise, but something more sincere. People recognized pieces of themselves in what they saw. Others saw something they wished they had not forgotten. And then, a familiar voice added weight to it all. Dr. Emily Carter appeared again, this time in a longer interview. In her modest clinic, surrounded by soft light and the quiet sounds of recovering animals, she spoke calmly, her tone measured, but firm. "He doesn't bring them in for recognition," she said, her dark eyes steady. "Sometimes he comes in late, sometimes early. Always the same. He stays until they're stable, then he leaves. I've asked him his name before. He never answers." She paused, then added softly, "But the animals remember him." That was enough. The story transformed. People began to organize. At first it was small, offers of food, blankets, supplies, messages sent through local groups. Then larger voices joined, amplifying what had begun as a quiet ripple. Among them was a woman named Margaret Hale. She was in her early 60s, with silver hair cut neatly at the shoulders and a posture that carried both grace and authority. Her skin bore the soft lines of age, but her eyes were sharp, attentive, eyes that had spent decades building something meaningful. Margaret had once run a successful foundation for community outreach, but after losing her husband years earlier, she had stepped back, choosing a quieter life, until now. She watched the video 3 times, then she made a call. "If no one else is going to build something around this," she said, her voice steady but resolute, "then we will." Within days, the idea took shape. Not a charity built on publicity, not a project driven by headlines, but something simple. A place. A place where animals like those in Ryan's home would not have to wait for someone to notice them before they were saved. The name came easily. Hope. Back at the house, Ryan sat on the worn wooden step outside his door, unaware of how far things had already gone. The German shepherd lay beside him now, stronger, its posture more upright, though still carrying the quiet fatigue of what it had endured. Its amber eyes followed Ryan's movements with quiet focus, as if still deciding what this new life meant. The kitten, smaller but no longer fragile in the same way, explored the edge of the porch, its steps tentative but curious. Ryan watched them both. "You two picked the wrong place," he muttered, though there was no real complaint in his voice. The dog shifted slightly, leaning closer. Ryan rested his hand against its head. "You need a name," he said after a moment. He considered it. Not something strong, not something sharp, something fitting. "Hope," he said quietly. The word settled into the air between them. The dog blinked once, then rested its head against his knee. Ryan nodded faintly. "Yeah, that'll do." By evening, vehicles began arriving. Not reporters this time. People. Some came quietly, leaving boxes by the fence. Food, blankets, medical supplies. Others knocked, offering help in hesitant voices, unsure how to approach a man who had never asked for any of this. Ryan answered the door each time. Not with enthusiasm, not with resistance, just acceptance. He did not ask for names. He did not ask for reasons. He simply took what was offered and used it where it was needed. Inside, the house changed. Not in structure, but in possibility. More space was cleared. More blankets laid out. Bowls filled more often. The quiet routine remained, but it was no longer held together by effort alone. It was supported. Somewhere in the growing network of people who had found his story, Margaret Hale stood at the center of something larger now. Plans were drawn. Land was discussed. Legal steps were taken carefully, deliberately. She did not rush. She built, as she always had, with patience and purpose. "This is not about him," she said in one meeting, her voice calm but firm. "This is about what he represents." And so, hope became more than a word. It became a place waiting to exist. Days later, when the foundation was formally announced, Ryan learned of it the same way he learned most things now. By accident. A printed notice left at his door. No signature. Just a message. A center is being built. For them. Because of you. Ryan read it once. Then again. He said nothing. But that night, as he sat inside the quiet warmth of his home, surrounded by the soft breathing of animals that had once been forgotten, something shifted, not in the world outside, but in the space within him that had long remained untouched. Not purpose, not yet, but something close enough to feel like it. And beside him, hope rested, no longer astray, no longer a survivor alone, but the beginning of something that would outlive them both. Sometimes, miracles don't arrive with thunder or blazing light. Sometimes, they come quietly, in the form of a man who refuses to walk away, or a dog who chooses to save instead of survive. Maybe God doesn't always send angels with wings. Sometimes he sends ordinary souls with extraordinary hearts. In our everyday lives, we pass by moments that ask us a simple question. Will you care, even when no one is watching? That is where miracles begin. If this story touched you, share it with someone who still believes in kindness. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments, and subscribe to keep these stories alive. May God bless you, protect your loved ones, and guide your heart toward compassion.